This is lesson number 7. I thought we'd talk about the different kinds of poles. We have been using in the previous videos a pole like this, which is Chinese waxwood. And Chinese waxwood is a small tree that actually grows. And what they do is they take it when it's a certain height, they cut it, cut off all the branches and smooth it out so it's got a natural taper, wider at the base, narrowing at the tip. And the waxwood is a nice white, a nice light but strong, flexible wood, which is why it's used a lot for weapons in Chinese martial arts. Okay? Now, this is compared to this pole, which is more typical. This is one of the exotic Asian hardwoods, similar to teak. There's several of them that are used for weapons, and this one's turned on a lathe, so it still tapers, wider at the bottom, narrower at the tip. And in the Chinese circles, this was known, or these kind of poles are called mouse tail poles, because I'm sure there's a Chinese word for that, because it tapers like a mouse tail. A mouse's tail would taper towards the end. And again, this is an exotic hardwood. This is not stained. If you when you sand this down for maintenance level, the sawdust is red. Right? Now the difference is, I can order these in bulk from martialartsmart.com and get them for 20 bucks a piece. A pole like this from everythingwingchun.com is about $200. So that's the big difference. And this one's a little heavier, but it'll last forever. Now, in the past, they have used poles that are up to 9 foot long. This one's 8 foot. And this one I just got at Home Depot. This is a closet rod, so it's not very heavy, it's just pine. And being so long, it would break easily just because of the stresses put on the pole. So normally these would be hardwood and very heavy. So we use a pole like this mainly for training, right? Mainly just to get the weight of the pole, to work on handling that bigger balance, and just as a training device. Now, in the old times, they would have used poles this big on the battlefield, or even to defend some of the villages. These big poles came from the red boats themselves, because part of Wing Chun history, the red boats were Chinese junks, like a mid-sized ship that the Chinese opera traveled around on along the southern coast and up the rivers. And they had a relatively flat bottom, so they could pull into port in various places so the performers could get off and make their money. And there were polers on the boats that were responsible for keeping the boat pushed back away from the dock, or pushing it off of a sandbar and helping control where the boat was going. And they used a long, heavy pole, and that was thought to be one of the initial weapons used as Wing Chun evolved, was using that pole from the boats. Now they also used big poles on the battlefield that were descended from the spears, because you can imagine this with a spear tip on the end. They fought in formations a lot. So if you had a big long pole, a pole this long, and I have someone standing on my left and on my right, then it's very difficult for an attacker to get past the tip of the pole. He may knock my pole down and try to go around, but then he's running into the guy on my side, right? Because that's the big draw, the big downside of a pole this big, is if the minute an opponent gets past the tip, the pole is hard to manage, and he can close very quickly, and it's hard to bring that pole back online to make a difference. So it's got the advantage of length, and the disadvantage is length, unless you've got somebody on either side of you. So, in contrast, if we go to something this short, now it's very easy to respond if somebody gets past the tip of the pole. I can just reposition and hit them and do different things. It's very fast, but now I've lost my advantage of reach. When I'm standing like this, my pole technically is no longer than the opponent's sword or staff or whatever weapon he's got. So now I've lost my reach advantage, and it becomes much more likely my technique is going to change, and I'm going to start using this in various ways, because it doesn't make sense to try to stay in this position. And that's really the difference between a pole and a staff. The implication when you say pole is that you're only using one end of the pole. The implication when you say staff is that you're going to use both ends to strike with, and it's a staff. Okay? So, the length then varies between very short to very long. Very short, you lose the advantage of reach. Very long, that length becomes a disadvantage if the opponent can get past the tip. So what we've come up with by trial and error in the old days, when they really fought with these things, was 7 foot was about the ideal length if you're going to use it for like one-to-one fighting for self-defense, because at 7 feet I've still got a good length advantage. So obviously that length is much longer than an opponent's sword would be, and yet it's still short enough that if somebody gets past the tip, I can move quickly and I can respond. So this is kind of the standard length, the 7 foot, with the taper in the pole. Okay.